So in shaping models for a just society, there's some criteria that they need to adhere to. And the main one is this: they must be models that transcend this society. They must be models that break with the models of oppression. And in order for us to do it, these models should be things that we have tested. That's key. Because if we don't transcend the models of this oppressive society, when we get to the point where we're running something of our own, we will reproduce the systems that we've lived under. I had a friend, Dr. Lodge Daly, had been a former prisoner in Soledad prison, had a group called the Soledad Prison Poets. And when he came out, he would do a lot of poetry, come to our organization and do it in the community. And Lodge had run a test on people because he then went back to school with Dr. Nathan Hare. They both got PhDs in psychology. Nathan already had one in sociology. He had been whiteballed by the university, so he needed another job. And Nathan, basically good psychologist, good analyzer of people. And so he did an experiment on what would Black people do if they were free. So they got to plot out all these things. You know what they did? They did the same thing they were doing under oppression, because that's all they knew. You understand? And in fact, some of our Black liberation movements, ended up failing because the slave mentality was still influencing their behavior. That discussion you saw on Malcolm and his assassination, had the leadership of the Nation of Islam undergone the freedom of the mind process and the freedom of the spirit and body that Malcolm underwent, they would have never been in league with the FBI in executing Malcolm. So, biggest thing we have to overcome is our own weaknesses. And that's also something that the models for just societies have to enable us to do, have to enable us to draw from our strengths so that we can transcend and overcome our weaknesses, because that's where our enemy comes at us and tries to do us in. So this is really key, that we have to have models that provide alternatives to this system. Models for just societies have to promote self-love. And this is really key because that's the essence of humanism. You can't love anybody else unless you love yourself. And I would say for all human beings, the journey from heaven to earth is a journey where we come here to learn lessons. This is the place where we can make choices. And the whole purpose is to get closer to God. And what is the essence of God? Unconditional love. I've experienced it. I know many of you have. God doesn't judge. And in fact, when you pass on to that other realm, it's your car that's going to judge you, your destiny. It's got a record of everything you've done. And if you look at, again, parapsychology, there's a lot of people who have gone to this other side, talk about this, period where a spirit goes through a memory of everything they ever did, positive and negative, and how it affected other people. That's judgment. They just got a chance to come back to clean their act up a bit, so that if they were tilting in the wrong side, going to that fiery place, maybe they could save themselves. But if they were good people as well, they got to see what that process was. So contained in you is the memory. You have cellular memory of everything you've ever done. At judgment, there's a memory, and we'll go into that in a minute, that you can't hide. You can't get up there and lie, say, I didn't do this. Your own spirit's going to testify on your behalf. That ain't God. So the systems that are models for just society, they have to be based on love. And they have to instill that, encourage that in the human beings that are the product of that society. The models for just society have to be models that we can apply now, not just something way off in the future, because it's the testing of it now that will enable us to understand that when we apply it in the future, when we're in control, when we're running societies, that it works. And so this takes us out of the Western system. See, despiritualized thought also leads to what's called the theory. And the theory is a guess. It can be right or it can be wrong. But models for just society have to arise either from practice, where we have tested things and see that they work, or from piping into God's mind, who gives us whole answers to problems that we then apply, or through good thought that we have tested and discard what doesn't work from what does work, and it promotes justice and the well-being of human beings. So this is important. The other thing about models for just societies is they must provide models or paradigms for victory. And that means that the models need to come out of victorious struggles. But don't get me wrong, we learn a lot from our mistakes. So a lot of times correcting mistakes, that's some of the best stuff that we get, because we're basically here to learn from our mistakes, learn from our errors. We're basically here because we realize in heaven, there were some things we hadn't learned in previous incarnations. I know some of you don't believe in past lives, but you think about it. If the purpose, one of the purposes of this journey of spirits having a physical experience is getting closer to God, do you think you're going to get close enough in one lifetime? I don't think so, you know. And in fact, if you look at your strengths as a person, those are usually the lessons you've learned. Those are the things that you do well. And in most of those who have studied this realm of life after death, they say very often we come back doing some of the same things we were doing before, because, meaning profession or something, not always, but sometimes. And that's because these were lessons we learned before. But the real thing about life is not the things that you already know. It's those things you don't know how to handle. And that is taught to you in what's called in the classroom called life crisis, when your butt is brought down to the ground. And when you are screaming and hollering, why me? And you're doing that, as the Buddha said, because you don't know how to handle the problem. And that's because you didn't learn the lessons in past lives. And so that's what we're really here for. So weaknesses are a pathway to strength. What we don't know is really why we're here, to grow. And this whole life is a gigantic classroom. And so when we're talking about shaping models for just societies, it is an essence to create the best human beings possible, to create situations where we can have some life of enjoyment expressed through love.